Hello, friends, and welcome to the Thursday episode of my daily podcast. I've got Barry Ritholtz joining me coming up. If you want to jump to that conversation, it begins at about 46 minutes into today's show. But I've got your headlines and clips. Want to remind you that I will be hosting a hangout tonight at 8 p.m. If you're a paid subscriber, you should be getting a link in an email, and you can join me at 8 East. Always a great time. Looking forward to seeing you tonight at our hangout. All right, let's get to those headlines, and let's start with your favorite newsman. It's our friend Kevin Richburg at Slate Hill Edible Forest. He'll join us tonight, but he always likes to remind us this.
The only story that matters is that President Trump is obviously a doddering, senile old man whose mental acumen when answering a question is indistinguishable from your great-grandfather who thinks the gnome people stole his banjo and won't give it back until he eats a raw tortoise. Addressing the press corps the other day, Trump opened up his box of senility on camera for all to see to talk about the forest countries. The people of the forest nations supposedly live deep in the forest, a forest so flammable that the forest people must be constantly scurrying, and they have to clean the forest and sweep the forest, for the people of the forest nation have the most flammable forest trees in all the land. If they don't sweep the floor, if they don't clean the floor, the forest will explode. It's the most flammable forest there ever was, and to save all the trees, the people of the forest countries cut down all the trees to save the trees, and their industry grew and grew and grew. The only story that matters is that Donald Trump's mind is potato pudding, a rambling jumble of incoherent hatred and a pastiche of word salads. He's as unfit to be president as your great-grandfather with a mouthful of tortoise.
There you go, Kevin Richburg. He's here every day reminding us the only story that matters. And thank you very much, Kevin. Brought to you by Slate Hill Edible Forest, SlateHillEdibleForest.com. If you need honey, send your money to Kevin Richburg. Okay. We hope to see you at Farm Jam as well, September 5th through 7th. Kevin will be hosting, and I always love his reminders, and it gives us the opportunity to plug his amazing work and our upcoming fiesta, party, retreat, gathering. I don't know what you want to call it. Farm Jam. All right. Now let's get to the news. Here are your headlines from yesterday, starting with, I guess, the top story would probably be news that cities across the U.S. are preparing for, of course, more protests this weekend, and probably every day for the foreseeable future. Protests have cropped up across the country since the Trump administration began deportation raids in L.A., prompting clashes between protesters and law enforcement. Demonstrations were planned for last night in Raleigh and Eugene, in St. Louis, among other locations. Downtown Los Angeles, the New York Times says, seemed like a ghost town after an overnight curfew was instituted. Still, tensions were high today as hundreds of Marines received training nearby on civil disturbances. And I'm not sure if anything too much took place overnight. I scanned the news real quick to see and haven't heard, but that is probably one of the top stories of these protests and them potentially spreading. New York Times also says that yesterday Trump celebrated trade progress with China, though I don't know if there was any. The details remain sketchy and haven't been confirmed, but after 2 days of talks in London, our Mad King announced that the U.S. and China had struck a deal to roll back some of the measures they've taken against each other's countries' economies. Details, though, were thin, they say. Under the deal, China would relax restrictions on rare earth minerals and magnets, while the U.S. would not impose visa restrictions on Chinese students and would relax some export limits. New York Times' Anna Swanson says, from what we know of the agreement, it appears to merely unwind the damage and escalation that the president's own trade war has already done. They haven't yet made any progress toward a new trade deal. University of Michigan economist Justin Wolfers says the U.S. and Chinese trade negotiators have negotiated a handshake agreement to seek sign-off to agree that a previously agreed agreement was still their agreed-upon agreement. That agreement is not an agreement, but a framework for seeking future agreements. And he added, notice that not only are we not getting a better deal, We're not even getting back to where we were at the start of this administration. And so a couple of reactions to the deal that isn't a deal. And what else can I tell you? How about this? More than 90 scientists at the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland signed, and another 250 supported anonymously, a letter to Health and Human Services Secretary and man with a worm brain, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and the leader of the NIH, Jay Bhattacharya. It's titled the Bethesda Declaration. The scientists used as a model Bhattacharya's own October 2020 Great Barrington Declaration, which echoed the political plan of the first Trump White House and called for ending any attempt to control COVID-19 and instead simply let it spread. The Bethesda Declaration, the new one by all these scientists, said, "We dissent to administration policies that undermine the NIH mission, waste public resources, and harm the health of Americans and people across the globe." It said the leaders of NIH and members of Congress who oversee it are prioritizing, quote, political momentum over human safety and faithful stewardship of public resources. They called out politicization of research by stopping high-quality, peer-reviewed grants and contracts, thus throwing away, quote, years of hard work and millions of dollars, risking the health of participants in studies and damaging public trust. They noted that some of the signers felt they had to remain anonymous, while others, due to a culture of fear and suppression created by this administration, chose not to sign their names for fear of retaliation. So that is where we are. I mean, it's crazy that we are at that point. I was talking to Zatz yesterday out in the woods, and this was his big issue and concern, that they got rid of the CDC vaccine advisory panel. There's a new schedule of vaccines that comes out every year, and the advisory panel is made up of academics and scientists who are independent and can't be influenced by outside interests. And Kennedy got rid of all of them. Well, yesterday he named 8 new members to the CDC's vaccine advisory panel, including 2 prominent critics of federal scientists. So I'm sure it's not just them. My understanding is that he also appointed one of the scientist seats is just going to sit there as a jar of measles. Liquid measles smoothie is now been named to the advisory panel. So that's pretty disconcerting, I would say. But what do I know about measles or measles smoothies? But my friend Dr. Zatz seemed pretty concerned, and he's a pediatrician, I should mention. So he was very worried about it. We're out there on the trail. He said, well, what are they thinking? You can't just get rid of all the scientists. I mean, what do we have to give vaccines out? He loves when I do a really exaggerated, completely inaccurate impression of him. All right, let's move on. Let's see. A defense official said 700 Marines have been mobilized in the Los Angeles area, but they're not in the city streets as part of Task Force 51. The official said Marines could be sent out as early as today, but there are no orders to do so at this point. The Marines are still going through some basic training about the standard rules of force. Oh, great. Well, the Marines will be ready soon. They'll be ready soon to do police work, which they're not supposed to do at all. And now everybody is obviously debating about the legality of all of this. Well, raise your hand if you saw a reunion between the world's richest man and the world's most powerful man coming. It may not be imminent, but at least one of them has expressed his regrets as the relationship lies in ruins. Elon Musk said yesterday on the social media platform that he fucking owns. In the early hours, he said he regrets some of the barbs he had posted as he and President Trump traded insults on social media, saying that they went too far. So he's trying to get back in there. Is it going to work? Yeah, it'll work. It doesn't matter that he said that Trump's name is in the Epstein files and that nobody's talking about it at all. The Southern Baptist Convention voted overwhelmingly on Tuesday. Should have mentioned this yesterday. I had it in my notes and forgot. But they want to overturn the Supreme Court ruling that legalized same-sex marriage. The leading Protestant group of people in the country, the Southern Baptists, they want to overturn same-sex marriage. Strategists are citing the successful effort that overturned the right to legal abortions as a possible blueprint for making America Gilead and the Handmaid's Tale. They're working very hard at it. We're not going to let them. They're never going to take marriage equality. They can try, but I don't think it's going to work. 24 universities, including 5 Ivy League schools and more than 12,000 alumni, took measures to back Harvard University in its legal battle against the Trump administration, which threatened to slash billions of dollars in grants. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio is pushing to investigate whether Harvard violated federal sanctions. So that is going to be something worth watching. Some Senate Republicans want to trim some of Trump's proposed tax cuts in the big bad bill. An overnight Russian drone barrage killed 3 people in Kharkiv, Ukraine. And in a departure from policy, Mike Huckabee, who is now the U.S. ambassador to Israel, said it should be up to Muslim countries to build a Palestinian state on their territory. So that's fun. He's fun. He seems great. I mean, I know him. He seemed great, but he never was. He's bad. Very bad. South Korea's new president ordered the military to turn off speakers that have been blasting K-pop songs into North Korea. Well, that's a pretty big deal. It's a pretty big move. And we lost Brian Wilson. First Sly Stone, and then a day later, Brian Wilson. 2 American music legends are gone. I don't have a tremendous amount to say about either one of them because it would be improper and disrespectful from me, who is not good at talking about music, to say much. But I'm sure you know that. But they're both gone, or that that you found out that they both died. But if you didn't, I feel bad that I'm the one telling you. Either way, I did want to mention it because I know that's out there in the zeitgeist and it matters to a lot of people. Those are your headlines. Now it's time to get to the clips that I've gathered for you on today's episode of Stand Up. Every day I do a roundup of sound bites of audio clips, and today, I got some great ones because I've got some Scott Bessent, who was testifying yesterday in Capitol Hill, as well as some Pete Hegseth, to Treasury Secretary and Secretary of Defense. I got a few clips of both them. So let's start with Scott Bessent, and you'll just hear the different Democrats questioning him. I'll just put them together back to back.
Now, you don't agree with the CBO. We've heard that several times. You also disagree with the Committee for Responsible Budget, who said that there's going to be a $3 trillion deficit from this. You disagree with that also, right? Yes. And you disagree with the Yale Budget Lab. You went to Yale. You don't agree with the Yale Budget Lab. They say there's going to be a $3 trillion deficit from this. Do you disagree with them also?
There are a lot of things I disagree with Yale on these.
You disagree with the Penn-Wharton budget model, who said there's going to be a $3 trillion deficit from this bill?
Yes.
You disagree with Elon Musk, who you supposedly do get along with now. It will massively increase the already gigantic deficit to $2.5 trillion and burden American citizens with crushingly unsustainable debt. Do you disagree with Mr. Musk on that issue?
Yes.
Do you disagree with Ray Dalio, who said that this is unsustainable?
I agree with Ray Dalio that we need to get our fiscal house in order.
Do you disagree with Jamie Dimon, who says it's going to cause a crack in the bond markets?
I met with Mr. Dimon the other day, and he wasn't necessarily referring to government finances.
He said there's going to be a crack that's going to take place in either 6 months or 6 years. And let's ask you, when do you think that's going to happen?
I believe he was referring to market structure.
Do you think that do you disagree with Mr. Fink from BlackRock, who said this is going to be an unsustainable problem as well?
I believe that we have to get our fiscal house in order.
I want to say, given your successful past, isn't this embarrassing?
Is there a question there, sir?
There's a question. Isn't this embarrassing?
Oh, is it embarrassing? Well, I'm sorry, Congressman, but you seem not to have seen the economic data. The GDP growth has been quite substantial. Job growth is solid.
GDP growth is half what it was last year, sir.
The job growth is solid, and we had
job growth is a third what it was all last year, sir.
No. And private sector job growth especially. And if you'd like to talk about inflation, would you?
The inflation has been coming down. Just the inflation is good so far. We will see every economic thing I read, which is much every day, suggests the impact of the tariffs is not hit yet.
Well, why don't we look at the data rather than the hysteria, which is how I made my career.
Are you confident that no information has been exported from the Treasury Department by DOJ personnel?
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
Have you investigated it to ensure us that that's absolutely correct?
Well, we have strict protocols around that, so there's no reason to believe that there was.
You know, I don't like to make fun of a stutter. I don't like to make fun of the way anybody talks, but he does not project wisdom or intelligence or strength. And from time to time, he tries to get a dig in. And when he does it awkwardly. He does everything awkwardly. I don't know how this guy's been successful in his life or in his career. He doesn't seem like a real person. He definitely seems like some kind of AI droid who's super uncomfortable and is malfunctioning and constantly glitching. Well, that's my professional opinion. Now let's go to professional asshole Pete Hegseth, whose own mom thinks he's a piece of garbage, or at least did until he got this appointment from our Mad King. And then she's like, no, listen, that letter I wrote about him, he's gotten better. Here he is.
We also wore a patch on our shoulder.
Yes.
That said ISAF, International Security Assistance Force. And you know what the joke was? That it stood for I Saw Americans Fighting. Because what ultimately was a lot of flags, was not a lot of on-the-ground capability. You're not a real coalition, you're not a real alliance, unless you have real defense capability and real armies that can bring those to bear. And that's a reality that Europe is waking up to quickly, and we're glad. Because they're our friends, and we want them to be safe and free and secure. And sometimes that takes true talk and tough love, and they've responded very well to that because we want them to succeed. And
Mr. Secretary, let's just make clear for the record that our military partners in Afghanistan included many who served and died. Our Danish partners and allies on a per capita basis.
Don't try to make it look like I don't care about the investments of our partners. Of course I do.
Mr.
I recognize
Secretary,
that there were lives lost from other countries.
Of
but
course
the bulk of the effort was Americans. And an alliance needs to include other countries and be more balanced.
Mr. Secretary,
to be a real alliance.
As I pointed out in my opening comments, our partners and allies have stepped up, have invested, have engaged in the defense of Ukraine, and so should we. We should not be pursuing a ceasefire and a negotiated resolution to the war in Ukraine at any cost. Peace through strength means actually using our strength, continuing to support Ukraine, and securing a lasting peace. Putin will only stop when we stop him. And the best way to stop him is indeed through a stronger NATO. I look forward to the NATO summit. I agree with you that a significant investment by NATO in our collective security is a great investment, but we cannot abandon Ukraine. That would put us significantly at a strategic disadvantage.
Maybe let me ask the question this way so that you can assuage people's concerns that there is a double standard. The National Guard was deployed here on January 6th, and that was a decision made by the Department of Defense. Do you support that decision? Do you believe that that was the right decision to deploy the National Guard to defend the Capitol on January 6th?
All I know is it's the right decision to be deploying the National Guard in Los Angeles to defend ICE agents who deserve to be defended in the execution of their jobs.
But I think it's important to know whether it was also important to have the National Guard defending the United States Capitol when there were violent protesters here on the president's behalf, to make sure that folks know that you care about protest, whether it's against the president or on behalf of the president.
Senator, I was in the Washington, D.C. National Guard when that happened and was initially ordered to go guard the inauguration of Joe Biden. But because of the politicization of the Biden administration, my orders were revoked. And ultimately, because of the politics that were being played inside the Defense Department by the previous administration.
But do you support the decision made on January 6th to send the National Guard here to defend
I
the
support
Capitol?
the decision that President Trump made and requesting the National Guard that was denied.
So you do not.
President Trump
you do not support the decision.
Support
you do not
for the National Guard
decision to send the National Guard here to defend the Capitol. I think that speaks to the worry that many Americans have that there is a double standard, that you are not willing to defend against attacks made on our democracy by supporters of the president, but you are willing to deploy the National Guard to protect against protesters who are criticizing the president. That's not how our taxpayer dollars are supposed to work. They're supposed to be used to defend the United States, no matter the nature of the political affiliation of the protesters.
Specifically, Mr. Secretary, what is the authority that the administration is using to deploy active duty Marines to California neighborhoods? What authority?
Senator, the president has constitutional authority in order to support.
Cite the provision of the Constitution.
I'd have to pull up the specific provision, but our Office of General Counsel, alongside our leadership, has reviewed and ensured in the order that we set out that it's completely constitutional for the president to use federal troops to defend federal law enforcement.
Look, I'd like to know the specific constitutional statutory authority. The President made it clear that he relied on Section 12406 of Title 10 with regard to the National Guard troops. I need to know the authority that he is relying upon in terms of active duty Marines being deployed to California neighborhoods.
Senator,
so you'll follow up with me?
Yes, Senator, but there's plenty of precedent of active duty troops being used to support law enforcement. Historical precedent.
I'm not disputing that. I am just asking you to cite the authority under which the active duty Marines are being deployed to California.
It's in the order, ma'am, but we'll make sure we get it to you as well.
Thank you.
The Department of Defense needs stable, competent, and strategic leadership. And much as I had feared back in January, is not what we are seeing under your leadership. In a matter of months, you have lost top aides and reportedly struggled to hire new ones. You have fired highly respected top military officials. You shared highly sensitive attack plans over Signal and apparently with people in your own personal circles, and you've not taken responsibility for those mistakes. The security challenges we face have grown larger, not smaller. And then in the face of these challenges, you have taken a series of actions that weaken our posture. For example, in my home state of Washington, which is home to many DoD installations critical to our Indo-Pacific strategy, you have pushed out almost 2,000 highly trained civilian employees, including at Puget Sound Naval Shipyard. Mr. Secretary, you talk about returning the department to its mission of warfighting, but I am repeatedly hearing that your policy and personnel changes at the Pentagon are only undermining, not strengthening our military's preparedness to protect our country. Now, Mr. Secretary, I have to say, for people who tout their commitment to transparency and efficiency, I've never seen an administration more bent on hiding basic facts from American people. Your department has been unresponsive to congressional inquiries and oversight requests, all the while you are working to muzzle the free press, denying journalists access to the Pentagon press corps. Now, before I turn to my questions, let me just note, it is now mid-June. And we only, just a few days ago, received some, but not all, important portions of your budget request. It should not have taken this long, and we do still need to see the justifications in order for this committee to do its work. We're missing those. Not having a full budget at this juncture is really unacceptable.
Okay, there you go. Montage of clips from Scott Besson as well as Patty Murray. How do I do it? How do I produce this segment alone with zero help? I don't know, but I get it done every day, so hopefully you appreciate it because that usually takes a team of people on television or radio or any other podcast or YouTube channel, but not here. So please, thank you for your support, and feel free anytime you want to upgrade your membership if it's worth it to you, especially if you're listening every day or several days a week. Patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Sorry, I don't do ads, but I do the strategic plugs whenever I can slip them in there. All right, let's get to some of the reactions to the military being used against civilians in the streets of America, as well as this dumb parade, military parade, taking place this weekend. Let's start with a Vietnam vet named Dave, who was in the 101st Airborne in Vietnam in 1969-1970, I think.
Good afternoon. My name's Danny. I'm a veteran of the 101st Airborne Division, serving in Vietnam 1969-1970 in the U.S. Army. You know, when I was in the 101st, we had a motto called Rendezvous with Destiny. I think events of the recent days indicate that we as Americans are going to have a rendezvous with destiny. Who are we as a country, and what values do we stand up for? You know, you don't send Marines, you don't send military detachments into the streets of America to confront citizens of this country. That's unconscionable. Therefore, I'm asking that the President, the Secretary of Defense, call off what you're doing. It's wrong. You don't send the military into the streets. You know better. You know what's going to happen. Marines, military personnel, are not trained in the use of due process. They're only trained in a couple of things: destruction and death. So I'm going to tell you that what you did today, President Trump and Secretary Hegseth, is sending a signal to America that you don't care about the citizens of this country. Your political motives are going to drive us into a place we don't want to be. So I'm going to say to you that are watching this video, what are your values? What's your rendezvous with them? What do you consider that you want to see out of what's happening right now? Who's driving the division? Who's causing this? We must stop it. We depend on our congressional leaders. We just depend on our judicial leaders. We depend on the executive branch to do the right thing. We've had a history of, maybe not so perfect background in America, but you know what? This is wrong.
All right. Well done, Dave. Agreed. Now let's go to a montage of veterans who were asked about this on the streets in Washington, D.C. on the mall. This roving reporter went around and found a whole bunch of veterans to talk to about this.
Were you a service member for?
2 years. I was drafted.
You were drafted?
1969. Just got married.
So how do you feel about a draft dodger throwing himself a $45 million military birthday parade?
No, the guy is an absolute fucking idiot.
No, I can't even tell you how angry that makes me feel.
I think it's a disgrace.
It's completely unnecessary.
Would you rather see that money put into the VA?
Yeah, absolutely. And also TRICARE treats bone spurs. So
Trump dodged Vietnam. He disrespected John McCain, who was a real actual veteran who served his country honorably, and even afterwards. So the fact that he would take this and use it as some kind of military prop, like he's going to be a dictator, because that's what dictators do.
Yeah, that's a great montage. Well done. And now let's go to CNN, where John Berman had Congressman and veteran Jake Auchincloss on his show.
Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. As a Marine, did you ever expect to see active duty members of the military, active duty Marines, deployed on U.S. soil in the capacity that they are now?
No, John, because in this scenario, as in almost every scenario imaginable, it is unnecessary, it's illegal, and it's deeply unfair to these Marines. These Marines signed up to sweat and bleed in defense of their country, not to be a political prop for a president who's sagging in the approval ratings.
Now here's Senator Tammy Duckworth yesterday. I think she was talking to Pete Hegseth in this clip, though. I'm not sure. I just saw this short clip, and she's awesome. Of course, she fought in Iraq. She's a helicopter pilot, and is it a triple amputee? Here's Senator Duckworth.
Let's be clear. You're not doing it to celebrate the Army's birthday. You're doing it to stroke Donald Trump's ego. If you want to celebrate the Army's birthday by spending $30 million, I would recommend you think about something along the lines of maybe spending that money on child care for military families, perhaps tuition reimbursement for military families. There are lots of ways to celebrate the Army's birthday without blowing it all on a parade.
All right. I don't know what that fuzz was on that clip. Sorry about that. It bothered me. If it bothered you, I owe you a deep and sincere apology. Let's go to Chris Murphy, who made this little clip yesterday for social media. Senator Chris Murphy. It does include Trump's voice, and I think it's important to hear this short one, but it's triggering.
So Donald Trump is having his big military parade this weekend. I actually don't want to talk about the parade. I want to talk about what Donald Trump said today about people who might be thinking about protesting the parade.
By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. And I haven't even heard about a protest, but, this is people that hate our country, but they will be met with very heavy force.
So what Donald Trump just said there is scary, right? Donald Trump is saying that he is going to respond to peaceful protests of his military parade with force, either from law enforcement or from the military. That is authoritarian shit, right? In the United States of America, you get to peacefully protest. And the President of the United States cannot threaten you with violence if you're coming out and protesting his policies. But that's the whole game here, right? You're seeing it super clear now. The President of the United States is going to threaten peaceful protesters with violence to try to stop you from protesting.
All right, there's more to that, but I got to move on. Here is Rand Paul yesterday. He's very upset. He's very hurt. I mean, sincerely hurt, because he got disinvited to the White House picnic that he loves taking his family to and was looking forward. But I include this clip not because I care about his feelings. because I appreciate his honesty here, and I love a Republican senator just calling Trump for what we all have always known he is. A little late to the party, Rand Paul, but still, I do appreciate this.
From my office, and it's kind of a great time of the year in the summer. My family comes up. My son and daughter-in-law and grandson are coming up because we were going to the White House picnic, but I've just been told that I've been uninvited from the picnic. I think I'm the first senator in the history of the United States to be uninvited to the White House picnic. The White House is owned by the taxpayers. We all are members of it. Every Democrat will be invited. Every Republican will be invited, but I will be the only one disallowed to come on the grounds of the White House. I just find this incredibly petty. I mean, I have been, I think, nothing but polite to the president. I have been a intellectual opponent, a public policy opponent, and he's chosen now to uninvite me from the picnic and to say my grandson can't come to the picnic. I just the level of immaturity is beyond words. I've been here long enough that if anybody has ever followed me, I've been a critic of Obama, I've been a critic of Biden, I've been a critic of the previous Trump, but always in I think, a reasonable fashion along policy. And so they've decided they want to declare war on my family and exclude us from the White House. And I just think it's incredibly petty, and I hope someone will ask them some questions about how they've decided to sink to this depth.
All right, there you go. Yeah. Well, here's a little bit more Rand Paul and some Senator John Kennedy, two Republican senators who don't much care for Trump's military parade, but they don't seem too upset about it. They don't really want to challenge him too much about it.
Thoughts on the parade that's going to take place? Some Democrats are saying it's a waste of money.
Yeah. Never been a big fan of goose-stepping soldiers and big tanks and missiles rolling down the street. So if you ask me, I wouldn't have done it. I'm not sure what the actual expense of it is, but I'm not really, we were always different than, the images you saw of the Soviet Union and North Korea. We were proud not to be that. And I'm not proposing that that's the image we want to project, but I'm worried about the image, that it isn't necessarily the best image to show.
Get your thoughts on the military parade. Some of your Democratic colleagues are saying it's a waste of money.
Well, look, it's the president's call. I wouldn't spend the money if it were me. The United States of America is the most powerful country in all of human history. We're a lion, and a lion doesn't have to tell you it's a lion. Everybody else in the jungle knows, and we're a lion. I would save the money, but the president wants to have a parade. He's the president, and I'm not.
Your thoughts on the parade?
He's the president, and I'm not. All right, John Kennedy, fucking idiot. All right, now let's go to the issue of immigration and deportation, mass deportation, and the horror we're seeing in the streets, in the fields, where Jacob Soboroff is reporting. The ICE is going into the fields and getting people. This is a report from NBC's Jacob Soboroff in Oxnard, California. I think this is a strawberry field that he's standing in. You've seen these videos. They're heart-wrenching. Here is some reporting and a couple of other comments, clips that I want to play on this issue, which continues to drive every day's news and tear our hearts out, just absolutely devastate us with these images. You're not alone if you're severely affected by this. Here's Jacob Soboroff reporting.
Strawberry field in Ventura County, California. I'm in Oxnard. This is one of the beating hearts of the Californian agricultural economy. California's economy is the fourth largest economy in the world, and the agricultural industry here is literally worth billions of dollars. There are thousands of farms in Ventura County, tens of thousands of farm workers. And this also happens to be the latest location in a series of immigration enforcement actions by the Trump administration and federal agents. Yesterday, video emerged and reports emerged of ICE chasing farm workers in fields just like this. Earlier today, we spotted a CBP helicopter flying over this area. The same helicopter, according to flight tracking information that we had seen down over the Metropolitan Detention Center in Los Angeles earlier in the week. Local officials here, including the mayor of Oxnard and the police chief, have spoken out publicly to let people know they don't believe these immigration enforcement actions are in the best interests of the public safety. nor of the workers here. There have also been protests in the wake of this in Ventura County, and just like Los Angeles to the east of us, it really has struck fear into the hearts of so many people here.
Indeed, and to the rest of us as well around the country watching this inhumanity take place right before our eyes. It's just absolutely horrible. Let's go to Congressman Greg Cesar. He represents Texas's 35 congressional district. He was on MSNBC last night with Jen Psaki. He had this to say on the issue.
The abuse is out of control. I think that we can all agree, kind of wherever it is you fall on the spectrum here in the Democratic Party, that this is just unacceptable. And what we're seeing now is that Donald Trump has gone so extreme that this isn't now just about immigrant rights. This is about the rights of everyone, including the rights of kids. I mean, let's just start with the kids. In Texas, an 8-year-old recovering from brain cancer was deported and separated from the medical care that she needed. We have ICE officers showing up at our school districts, pretending that they're coming to check in on kids with parental consent, and their parents have not given consent, and their teachers are having to ask for warrants. In my district, as we just described, there are photographs of kids with their hands zip tied together, and so this is no longer just an immigrants' rights issue. It's an issue about protecting the rights of all Americans, and I think that connects to our need to reform these federal agencies to make sure that they actually follow the Constitution and basic rights. So I think we kind of have gone beyond the 2017-2018 moment to one where everyone's rights are at stake. I mean, look, you don't have to be an immigrants' rights voter to recognize that it's really scary for the President of the United States to take the Marines that are supposed to be protecting us in war and sending them for political purposes into our American cities. That's not what those Marines are trained for, and it's not what they want to do.
All right, and I loved this from the mayor of Boston who made this statement last night. Her name is Michelle Wu, and she's real good. I like her a lot from what I've seen so far, and I really like this.
My advice to Tom Homan and ICE is to take a timeout, reassess what you are doing and how you are doing it. A little friendly advice from the safest major city in the country. We know how to keep people safe. The American people are not stupid. No one is buying that these secret police tactics are making communities safer. The coordinated attacks that we are seeing on our constitutional freedoms, on due process, on research, science, education, and institutions around the country, but especially based here in Boston, are designed to destroy our sense of trust and connection. We are taking every possible action here in our city to push back and to stand up for basic rights, for our freedoms, and for the opportunities that we have been building here as a city whose mission every day is to be a home for everyone. We're leading a coalition of cities from all around the country in a brief challenging billions in illegal cuts to federal funding that would end life-saving medical research on everything from cancer and diabetes to Alzheimer's. And we've been pushing back on the important federal grant dollars that have been threatened to be rescinded or terminated. The City of Boston will regularly submit Federal Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA, requests to the Department of Homeland Security regarding federal immigration enforcement activity to find out who they are detaining and arresting and on what grounds. Boston is the safest major city in the country because we are a city that's safe for everyone. That safety and hard-earned trust is being jeopardized by the Trump administration's actions. And in Boston, we will stand strong for our community members and our residents. The least that can be done is to make sure that we are receiving information after arrests of who has been taken and why and where.
Yes, well done. Very good stuff from that mayor and other mayors around the country. Michelle Wu in Boston doing a great job standing up for the rule of law and for the people who make their cities work each and every day. And now let's go to Fox News' Jessica Tarlov. She's the liberal on the panel at the Fox and really on the network. And there's new data, new polling out, and it's really bad for Donald Trump, like real bad, including on his signature issue. And I'm sure you're rolling out your eyes and like I do when I see polling, because it's like, are we going to have elections again? Does polling matter? Does public opinion matter to tyrants? Fair enough. That's fair. But still, I think this is important. And I wanted to share Jessica Tarlov on it because she's telling Fox News viewers about this.
Gavin Newsom is speaking for a majority of Americans. Right before we came on air, there was a new Quinnipiac poll that was released. So Donald Trump, -12 on approval in general, -11 on immigration, and -16 on deportations. He has taken his best issue and decimated it by making these deportations in a hasty way. It used to be go after the criminals. That's what we heard was going to happen. Now it's go to the nail salons, go to the job sites, go to birthday parties, go to immigration courts. There is now no right way to do it. There is no way to be part of the system, pay your taxes, make a better life for your family, and hopefully get citizenship. Stephen Miller is mad because they were deporting less people on a daily basis than Joe Biden was. So he went and he said, go to 7-Eleven and you go to Home Depot.
I cut her off. Sorry about that. All right. Well, I want to wrap up with some laughs. So let's get to Jimmy Kimmel last night in his monologue on ABC.
The National Guard and the Marines are occupying downtown Los Angeles to stop the imaginary riots that are taking place exclusively in the president's head, ahead of his big North Korea-style birthday parade this weekend. Trump spoke to the troops at Fort Bragg, the military base named after him, where he regaled them with a slew of insults about L.A.
Within the span of a few decades, Los Angeles has gone from being one of the cleanest, safest, and most beautiful cities on earth to being a trash heap.
Okay, now let me tell you something. I moved to Los Angeles in 1994. I've been here for more than 30 years. It was always a trash heap, okay? This has nothing to do with anything. And I find it especially rich coming from the guy who single-handedly turned Atlantic City into a rusted-out, syringe-filled raccoon's nest. But the Pentagon's estimating that this National Guard stunt of his will cost at least $135 million. There's been so much misinformation, so much cherry picking when it comes to what they show on TV. I mean, if you turn on Fox News, you'd think LA was getting invaded by more aliens than the movie Mars Attacks. They are working so hard to make this seem like a lawless battleground. You guys are here in LA. Does it seem like a lawless battleground to you right now? But I think I might have found what set Donnie off. I think it started with one protester, this guy, who apparently has information saying that Trump has a chode. And that is very rude. It's not a chode. His son's name is Eric, okay?
All right, great stuff from Kimmel. Now let's check in with The Daily Show. What did they have last night? It was Desi Lydic in the anchor chair. And we do hear a little bit of Trump's voice, but it's just to make fun of him, as always.
Let's kick things off with meme coin entrepreneur Donald Trump, who also moonlights as president of the United States. Yesterday, he went to Fort Bragg to give a speech to his favorite men in uniform who aren't in the Village People. He was there to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the Army, so of course he ended up discussing Joe Biden.
We had a grossly unfit president. And by the way, I've known this guy for a long time. He was never the sharpest bulb.
Sharpest bulb. What a wordsmith. See, most people would have gone with brightest bulb or sharpest tool, but Donald Trump took half of both and smushed them together. That is what makes him the cream of the litter. Trump wasn't there to talk about Joe Biden. He was there to talk about America's proud military history. And that went great, too.
Recently, other countries celebrated the victory of World War I. France was celebrating, really. They were all celebrating. The only one that doesn't celebrate is the USA, and we're the ones that won the war. Without us, you'd all be speaking German right now. Maybe a little Japanese thrown in.
I know what you're thinking. Why would we be speaking Japanese when they were on our side in World War I? Well, I think it's because he said World War I, but what he meant was light bulb. But just for the record, I'd love to speak German and a little Japanese because that would help me understand like 95% of the porn I watch. Does anyone know what Eine kleine Megachode means?
All right. Very good. Desi Liddick over at The Daily Show. All right. That's it. That's all I've got for you in the news headlines and the clips. I want to get this up and posted for you to listen to and share with your friends. Tell your friends about Stand Up and everything that I put into this show every day, and that I'd love to have them join our community, and I'd love to meet them and see them at our hangouts. So hope to see you tonight. But right now it's time to get to my conversation with Barry Ritholtz. We caught up yesterday on YouTube Live. Some of you were there, and thank you for showing up. You can watch it now if you want to go over to youtube.com/standupwithpete and subscribe. You can. Barry Ritholtz, of course, has written now 2 books, Bailout Nation, and his new book, How Not to Invest, the ideas, numbers, and behaviors that destroy wealth and how to avoid them. We talked a little bit about the book again, but more importantly about current events, current economic trends, indicators, and more. We start by talking about Costco, which I went to yesterday for only like the 3rd time. I mean, I've been there a few times, but I was very intimidated to go to Costco and buy groceries. And I'm now living alone and trying to figure it all out, how to cook for myself and grocery shop. And everybody, the people, they tell me I got to go to Costco. So that's where we start with Ritholtz. Listen to his podcast, Masters in Business. Read his blog, The Big Picture. And if you want, you can invest with Ritholtz because he owns his own financial advisement, wealth management firm, I guess it's called. Ritholtz.com. Let's do it right now with Big Barry Ritholtz, who, by the way, not so big anymore. He just lost 25 pounds. Looking good, Barry. Let's do it. Barry Ritholtz here in the middle of the week, in the middle of June. Plenty to talk about with you. Thank you very much for getting off of your perch, your throne, and financial media and investment and slumming it with me.
Happy to slum it with you, Pete, anytime you like.
I went to Costco today. I've only been there a couple of times.
Is that true?
Yeah, and
they have some good stuff. It's just big portions, big serving size.
What do you think about those types of stores? I had no idea.
So the Costco business model is kind of fascinating. They sell everything pretty much at a break even. They make their money on their annual membership. Which is like $89 or $109. I don't even know what it is. I confuse that with Amazon Prime. But that's their gig. And, they very famously have been selling these hot dogs and a bun for $1.50. And some junior executive said to the CEO, why don't we raise the price of that? It's been $1.50 for 22 years. And the CEO says, next person who suggests that, I will murder with my bare hands. That's how, they have their gig, they have their value. If you need 4 quarts of tikka masala sauce or a gallon of salsa, it's a great place to go. If you're an empty nester, if it's just you and the wife, well, ain't a whole lot of – I don't know if you need a stack of 200 legal pads and 4,000 pencils, but they got that.
So that was my thought because I live alone now and I don't think that that's the place for me because I don't need to buy everything in bulk. Right. But not the case. You can get you still. I feel like you could still save a lot of money going to those stores, no matter who you are, no matter what your needs are. And I think I proved it today. And I also bought just a few things I probably didn't go into the store for, like a hat.
Well, you need a hat in the sun. It's June.
Yeah,
you don't have natural covering, regardless of whether it's gray or not. You need something to protect that dome.
Thank you for justifying the purchase. I do need that. Okay. Well, I want to talk about you about some of your recent posts and everything that's happening. But I gotta just ask you just about where we're at right now with the economy and with trade and with this potential legislation moving through the House and how much markets have changed in these first 5 months of the year of this Trump presidency, because I'm not following it that closely, but we're all very scared. What is your overview right now?
So, kind of mixed. So Trump was fortunate again to inherit a very robust economy and a very strong market. Nobody really expected the sort of over-the-top, wacky tariffs that he rolled out on April 2nd. I call that a collective failure of imagination. With the benefit of hindsight, hey, didn't this guy run on this? Didn't he put tariffs in last term? Doesn't he call himself Tariff Man? Like, he's been enamored of tariffs his whole adult life. In fact, he had his son Jared go find me an economist who supports tariffs. And there's one guy who's a fourth-tier economist at a second-tier school. He's the guy that they ended up making the head of trade policy.
You talking about what? Nutlicks?
No, Peter Navarro.
Right, yeah.
Like, there aren't. We've seen this movie. We know how it ends. We saw it in 1930. Reliving the pandemic from 1918 wasn't enough. Now we're going to relive the tariffs, which didn't cause the Great Depression, but it made it much worse. So we know, every economist in the world knows that this is like a giant VAT tax on consumers. And the reason we saw this spasm in the markets are, hey, people only have a finite amount of money. Companies are only going to make a certain amount of profits. And if you're going to add a 10 or a 30 or a 50 or 135% tariff on goods, people are going to have that much less money to spend. The companies are going to make that much less profits. Either the economy shrinks or goes into a contraction, the rate of growth slows down or it actually gets smaller, or corporate America just does poorly and we see the stock market come down substantially. Hey, that's everybody's retirement, 401k, IRA, kids' college fund, 529. No one wants to see that happen. It happens organically, but no one wants to make that happen. So the initial reaction in April was, holy shit, what's going on here? Eventually, the market kind of sussed out, oh, this guy isn't going to go through with this. The market is undefeated. I did a post showing the history of every time the market plummets 10, 12, 14% in a week, scares the bejesus out of Congress, and they, what do you need? It happened in, the fall of 08, October of 08, Ben Bernanke testified in Congress and said, listen, we're just supposed to keep unemployment low and keep inflation low, and we're not authorized to maintain the financial system and to unfreeze credit. You have to give us the authority if you want us to do that, and we need some money to do that. Congress said no. The market sold off like 13% in a week. That was on a Monday. By Friday, Congress said, whatever the hell you want, just make it stop. And then the same thing happened in 2020. There was a debate on renaming a library in D.C., and the Republicans and the Democrats couldn't agree on talking about meaningless nonsense. The old joke, why are academic fights so vicious? Because they're so meaningless. A library in D.C., don't we have bigger fish to fry? And then the NBA shut down, and then the world suddenly realized, oh, shit got real. And they immediately passed the biggest fiscal stimulus as a percentage of GDP since World War II, the CARES Act 1.
There were more adults there now, and I'm not asking you to necessarily compare.
I don't know if that's true. I think that people need to will dabble in the black arts and the nonsense until they get scared enough, and then the adults. So the adult here is Scott Bessent. A week and a half later, I wasn't privy to the conversation, but I like to imagine it when something like this, market like plummets 5%, 3 days in a row. And the president measures himself on how well the market is doing. And I just imagine Scott Bessent running into the Oval saying,
yeah,
Mr. President, you got to do something. Otherwise, you will be known as the worst president since Hoover. And so they put a 90-day.
So you think, Scott Bessent and probably a few others. I heard there was reporting that they were trying to do things when like Elon wasn't in the room or Navarro wasn't.
No, it was when Navarro wasn't in the room. They waited till he was all there. Someone asked me what's going to happen the rest of the year, and my answer was, tell me who the last person to whisper into Trump's ear before he makes a decision. If it's Scott Bessent, we're fine. If it's Peter Navarro, well, strap yourself in. We're going to see a bumpy ride.
What was the dumb word he made up? He said, people were getting skitchy, whatever he said, and then he caved. And people in your world gave him a new nickname.
Taco.
Taco. Trump always
chickens out. Yeah.
Is that a thing is that now like a rule? Is that now
here's the thing. the market eventually figures everything out, right? When I know some people almost put like a mystical religious symbolism on the market, I'm not in that camp. However, if you think about the market as a probability calculating machine that is exercising the collective wisdom of everybody as expressed through their buying and selling, it's more or less kind of pretty good over the long haul. You know, it'll be wrong from Monday to Tuesday to Wednesday, but it's pretty right decade over decade and year over year. You know, there's an old joke. Markets have forecast 9 of the last 3 recessions. So you can't get too hung up on the daily or weekly swings because sometimes they're just noisy. But by and large, the markets have reflected the most efficient allocation of capital to invest in the innovative genius of humanity. I should write marketing copy for the New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
But if you think about it, hey, like NVIDIA's been around forever. It was a chip maker, then it was a chip maker for mobility and games, and then suddenly they cracked the code on AI, and more or less you've been watching that stock rise now for a decade as more and more people figured out, oh, this AI thing is going to be big. And we've seen that time and time again. Sure, short term, certain stocks get shellacked too much, and sometimes they go high too much. But collectively, it's, you know, mostly more or less sort of eventually efficient. It gets it right, plus or minus.
Let me ask you again, though, about the tariff situation. Today, here are just some headlines, because it seems like a lot of attention is being paid to, as it should be, the deal or no deal or negotiations with China. BBC, Trump claims rare earth deals done with
What
China.
deal? Show me the document. Show me the people agreeing
New
to
York
this.
Times says Trump hails progress with China, but details are sketchy.
Yeah.
CNN, Trump's China truce is nothing of the sort. NBC News, Trump says China tariffs will stay high after 2 days of talks. And finally, Reuters says deal getting U.S.-China trade truce back on track is done, Trump says. So these headlines vary between taking what Trump says and putting them in there and questioning what he says. And
show me the money. Show me the money. That's all. Show me the deal. Show me the paperwork. He's very big on signing the executive orders. Great. We cut a deal with China. Maybe show me the receipts, please. I'd like to just see them. Because when people tell me stuff, I have learned never take candy from strangers. So
there you go.
Especially someone who has a track record of, how can I say this? Perhaps not always being 100% on the money truthful. Is that a fair statement?
I mean, it's unbelievable. Every day it's uncanny that he tops himself with a mountain of bullshit that he just keeps piling up.
So when someone says, someone with anybody in that position who has a history of, let's call it, being less than fully forthcoming or saying things that are subsequently demonstrated to not be exactly true, just show me the receipts. Hey, the 2 biggest superpowers in the world strike a giant economic deal. Do I get a little receipt? Like when you Venmo, I get an email.
Yeah.
Your sister sent you $27 to pay for dinner last night. I get the Venmo. Show me something. Otherwise, I just have to assume it's more nonsense. The fascinating thing about the market is that the market has figured out pretty quickly that it's all bullshit. The tariffs are bullshit. The deals are bullshit. I'm just going by what's happening.
Yeah.
They are looking at overall what is happening with the data. This year we've been paying a lot of attention to the soft data, which is what some people call sentiment and surveys. CFOs, how much are you going to spend on CapEx? Families, are you going to Disneyland this year? That sort of stuff. That's turned negative. You can understand why a company might not want to allocate a few $100 million to build a new factory, because I need to have some clarity as to what's this going to cost me? Will I be able to hire people? What's it going to cost to move stuff over the border? I need some information, and I'm just going to wait until the dust settles.
when I think about economics and finance and what role government and political leaders can play at the state level, much less obviously at the national level, we talk a lot about these policies and the roles that government can play, whether it be regulating any kind of industry, much less trade deals, tax policy, and I guess the most typical or historic one is, government investment, passing legislation and investing into community states and projects and so on. But one thing we haven't really seen or talked as much about, and this is just off the cuff, so maybe I'm missing out, I'm no expert, that's for sure, is politicians, government having an effect on the economy by making America unattractive and unsafe, and in another way we haven't really seen, deporting so many people who are specifically contributing to the economy in restaurants, in fields, and at construction sites. Those two things seem somewhat new, and I'm not sure how much they're going to affect the overall economy, but man, it wouldn't be surprising, because if people don't want to come to America because they're worried they're going to get stuck here, next year of the World Cup, he's got this travel ban. All those countries' players and fans aren't going to be able to come. That's money lost. Not to mention if they are worried about going to work because they might get deported. So on the issue of these deportations and just making America less attractive, do you think those things actually make an impact in our economy?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. You can see it in the numbers of travel from the UK, from Canada, from Europe. Broadway ticket sales are more or less okay, but there are some signs that you saw it with Delta and JetBlue, maybe it was Southwest was the other one, that have said that the lack of clarity, the uncertainty about what's going to be what, has led a number of people to cancel travel plans. I mean, think about it. You usually don't book a flight next week. I got travel coming up in August. I already booked the flight. I have travel in September. I'm about to book the flight. But if you're thinking about, hey, maybe we'll come to New York, take in a play, go to some museums, watch those numbers. You're going to start to see those suffer. And it's not just New York City. It's the whole country. Look, America, for better or worse, is a brand. We export our culture. We export our entertainment. People have imitated the leadership that we've demonstrated economically, militarily, politically, and certainly culturally. There's a risk of a black eye and some damage to America, the brands, which affects America, the economy. We're still a global economic leader, and it's not impossible to roll back some of the damage that has been done in the first, 3.5 months, 4 months. But I am starting to elevate concerns that, hey, if this continues, this is going to be really problematic. The odds of an unforced policy error just continue to rise. In the beginning of the year, Torsten Slok, a very savvy economist who works for the Apollo Group, said 0% chance of recession this year. The economy is so strong, the market is doing so well, consumers are flush, corporate America is doing well. I see 0 chance of a recession. And after April 2nd, that rose substantially. Oops, I never expected this sort of mayhem. So now we're looking at 30, 40, 50% chance of recession, depending on who you speak to. It really depends on what we said earlier. Tell me who the last one to whisper in the president's ear. Yeah. And I could give you pretty decent recession odds.
Every analysis, lots of analysis, depends who you ask, but you look at different organizations when it say that mass deportations is pretty bad for the economy. And so you're talking mostly about the tariffs and so on, or rather, just the tourism.
And just some of the backlash from the Canadians.
Yeah.
Most sovereign nations don't find it amusing that you're saying you should be our 51st state. And that would be great. Just continue guaranteeing us health care and retirement, and we'll have a conversation. By the way, I'm going to bet you that the average Canadian is far to the left of the average American, so you really want to bring in a state that's going to swing the country to the left. By the way, Panama Canal, Greenland, Canada, these are all just nonsensical distractions. Pay attention to what's actually being done. Now that Doge is gone, we're on to the next thing. Like Doge was going to save trillions. It probably cost us a dozen or $2 billion, given all the expenses involved in canceling contracts that were already pre-existing.
What about mass deportations, housing, construction sector, agriculture? Is there any analysis?
Restaurants, agriculture, construction, home construction, renovation.
Like huge percentages in certain states, obviously. I think Karen Bass said in certain parts of California, 80% or higher of the people in the construction, I think she said 80% were undocumented. I don't think she said they were. Yeah, I mean, like.
Right. So the reason this, we were supposedly going after gang members, right? But who's hanging outside of a Home Depot? It's workers looking for a job. A contract comes along and says
they should be offered some kind of pathway to citizenship if they're that ambitious that they're standing outside a Home Depot. Somebody should take them aside and say, "Thanks for coming. Looks like you want to work."
Let me remind you, there was a deal on the table until then candidate Trump killed that deal.
Covered it.
So this serves a purpose. I don't agree with the purpose. I don't agree with the strategy. But none of this is by accident. This is all by design.
I mean, I'm waiting to see the doomsday nightmare. It's got to affect certainly small businesses and companies in all these sectors, the service industries. But it's got will it affect an entire industry? Like this guy, Stephen Miller, is pissed that they weren't going to obvious places to find people who were clearly not committing crimes because they thought it would be easier to find people to deport. Do you think entire industries get affected by this? Also, it's not like new people are coming in. They're sending out I don't mean to be too hyperbolic, but it would seem that they are deporting the only people who will do certain jobs.
It's perplexing to me, and I mentioned earlier the collective failure of imagination. It's very hard to logically deduce something that is driven by illogic and emotionality. And I can't figure out, what's the motivation other than xenophobia for deporting people who there was a documentary, A Day Without a Mexican, about, all the crops in the fields can't get picked. And immigrants come to the country and do the jobs that the native-born Americans don't or won't do. I mean, I waited tables in college. I did bartending and short order chefs. I don't know if college kids today really are enthusiastic about that. They certainly don't want to be a dishwasher, but those are the sort of jobs that tend to go to, not to paint too broadly, but you mentioned construction, renovation.
There is not a
service.
White person.
You left out medical care and elder care.
They're the entire huge. They are what were named essential workers during the pandemic. And to see what's happening, it just I can't imagine thinking. And you said that the only reason for this is xenophobia. Yeah, there's no special interest in lobbying government at the state or federal level to do this, because every industry loves their cheap labor. Every single industry and company. And why aren't they arresting the business owners that are hiring them?
There was an argument a couple of years ago about HB1 visas, and we want more of these people because they help keep wages down for the coders and the tech bros. And now we're kind of going the other direction. It's I am perplexed as anyone. I recognize the reality. We have rarely been so subject to the whims of a single person, although there seems to be some, like we saw in the 2020 election, the court losses continue to pile up, and at a certain point, the options to do a certain approach. I'm not a policy analyst. You have a majority in the House and Senate. How have you not? Why is everything executive orders? How have you not introduced your legislation to Congress yet?
Well, that brings us to the legislation that they did pass out of the House. And
that's all right. So that's 1/3 of the process.
And of course, it's in the Senate right now, and who knows what happens. But the argument around the budget deficit and national debt that it blows up is one that obviously Elon Musk and other people are making, serious Republicans in both the House and Senate. And I, tend to believe more the Stephanie Kelton views and modern monetary theory around it. But what I'm seeing, if you go and then you Google Treasury bond market and you look at the headlines for that, they're not necessarily great. The U.S. Treasury, by the way, is about to auction off some 30-year bonds. I'm not sure if we should be caring about that or what that matters, but the bond market is potentially freaking out. What's going on there, and how does that relate to this bill, or any other thoughts about this big, bad, beautiful, budget-busting, blonde, bleach blonde, bombshell bullshit?
So I think generally the initial reaction to the tariffs and just what looked like the destruction of the post-World War II Pax Americana, something which, by the way, has led the United States to be the strongest, most wealthy country in the world, like the thought that, hey, this guy's throwing that out the window, maybe we need to bring some capital back home. Let's sell some bonds, which sends rates higher. So let's bring our dollars, our cash in, sell our dollars, get our euros and our yen and our won back, and bring our money home, because, America, which has been known for its stability and rule of law and sanctity of private property and court system which will enforce property rights and contracts, that seems to kind of be up in the air. And I wrote a piece, I want to say in 2020, how much is the rule of law worth to America? And the answer was somewhere around $25 to $50 trillion.
Yeah.
And that goes out the window, bad things happen. So again, there's one or two adults in the room that run into the Oval and say, Mr. President, Mr. Hoover, you sure you want to do this? And so that kind of keeps him somewhat in check. I don't want to say Uncle Sam has been beaten up, but certainly it feels like Uncle Sam has a black eye. And that's being reflected in, when I talk America the brand, it's not just, streaming Netflix. It's the totality of the political, economic, and military leadership of the nation. And that's been undercut pretty substantially.
What do you think about inflation right now? I mean, looming inflation data may lock interest rate cut forecast is one headline.
Block or lock?
Rock. Sorry.
Rock. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. We had beaten inflation. Inflation peaked in June 2022. A year later, it was down under 3. 2 years later, it was down in the 2s. We won. It was all over until someone says, I'm going to introduce a highly inflationary set of policies that, even if it's just a one-time price increase, you're causing prices of goods and services to go up. No, companies aren't just going to eat it. You've passed a giant VAT tax on consumers if they stand, and that's inflationary. I wanted the price of eggs down, so many people have said. Look at what's happening. Everything we bring in from Canada, from Mexico, from Europe, from Asia. It'll be interesting when there's a risk that store shelves are going to be out of products. I don't think it'll be like the pandemic, but there's an increasing risk that there are going to be spot shortages unless the policy gets walked back fairly substantially. And again, I don't know what he's going to do. I'm not in the business of predicting the whims of any one single person. If I wanted to predict what a judge would do or what any one person would do, I would have stayed a litigator. I got no interest in that.
Now, today's information on inflation, U.S. inflation rises 0.1% in May from prior month. So
got to annualize that 0.1 times 12.
Okay, but in terms of markets and in terms of forecasts, it's less than expected. And so, maybe the damage from Trump's tariffs isn't guaranteed. New York Times CPI shows U.S. inflation remains muted as tariff impact is limited. Axios inflation reports suggest damage from Trump's tariffs isn't guaranteed. So that's today's information on inflation. I guess the most important point is the one you already made. We had it beat.
Right. And, the entire tariff issue. We still don't know what's going to happen. Where's this going to go? How far are tariffs going to be? I'm lowering.
Where's he going?
I'm going down because I want to get comfortable for the rest of this conversation.
Oh, I didn't know you were standing. The standing desk.
Yeah, I was standing the whole time.
Bring it down a little more. Bring it down a little more. Your headspace is so much between your Bob Barker hair and that's all right.
So anyway,
do anything.
You know what tariffs are going to stick? It's the on again, off again, on again, off again nature that makes it so hard to figure out what's really going on here. And so, yes, inflation has come down. Came down 2 years ago. It came down long before the election. You had a bird flu, which was the main reason why the price of eggs were as high as they were. Here we are. So it's always fascinating to see people run on one sort of agenda and then immediately pivot to something else. Although, to be fair, Trump has been talking about deportations. He's been talking about tariffs. He's been talking about all this stuff his whole career. They're just so kind of wacky and counterindicated and self-destructive that, again, collective failure of imagination. No one thought you were serious about that. I didn't think you really meant it when you said you wanted to deport 10 million people.
Took him for what he said, but I guess it's hard for smart people to believe that you would kick your own dick every time.
Right. Try not to power staple gun your testicles to your thigh. Don't do that. I think we could all agree that's a bad thing. Right? And yet, here we are.
I don't think my balls are big enough to reach, but moving on. How about any other markets before I get to one of your latest posts?
The dollar is a big thing. I think that we are underappreciating the value of having the world's reserve currency as the U.S. dollar. It has been called America's exorbitant privilege. I just can't imagine that anybody who understands economics would put our exorbitant privilege at risk. And that's really a big deal.
How worried are you about our
25%? That's where I am. I was at 10%. I was at 10% January 20th. I was at 0% a year ago. So this is a big change.
What about markets, commercial or residential real estate, automobiles? Anything you want to say about them?
I like them. I like cars and I like houses. And we should be making more of both.
Yeah.
Following the financial crisis, we spent over a decade underbuilding houses. And the only reason we got away with that was so many of that generation post-financial crisis were living in their parents' basement. And then the pandemic came along and suddenly everybody wanted housing. So not only did we underbuild single-family houses, and we have some pretty aggressive NIMBY laws that prevent more home construction, people want to live where the good jobs are. And for the most part, the good jobs are not where there's plenty of open space and not a lot of land to build. You know, I was just in Silicon Valley in San Francisco. Every time I'm there, I'm just astonished at how much more built up it is since the last time I was there. You look at New Jersey, it's one of the wealthiest states in the country. It's also one of the densest. And why is that? Well, you have proximity to New York and proximity to Philadelphia, and a lot of really good jobs are there, and that means the housing stock is really high. Wherever else you see good jobs, home prices are hard. We were just in Chicago, which is a little more reasonably priced in the Midwest than New York or San Francisco. I think because the winters are really tough. You got to be you can't be a wimp. You got to be a tough guy to put up with Chicago winters and the heat of Chicago summers. So maybe that's part of why their rent is a little more modest. But also, they're not an island. They can keep building out, and they have been. And Chicago has always been a great city. It feels very reasonable. But look at D.C., look at Boston, look at San Francisco, look at Los Angeles. A lot of the major business centers in the country are constrained by their housing stock. P.S. I can't remember the last time you could say the fastest growing cities in the United States weren't the coastal areas. They were inland. But that's what's going on there. The Midwest, and this is all post-pandemic elements driven by fiscal stimulus and government policy. The Midwest, look at Nashville, look at Austin, Texas, I can name you a dozen cities. Charlotte, another big
I don't know.
city.
I don't know if this is quite the same, but anywhere north of New York City, all of upstate New York is looking a lot more valuable.
It's still pretty sparsely populated. Like something like 2/3 of the population are, in the bottom quarter of the state. But when you look around elsewhere, look at Indianapolis or I'm just going through all these various cities that have really seen an uptick. The Sun Belt has done really well. Colorado, a lot of the Midwest and just West have done really well. The coastal areas that are so developed, so dense and populated, it's hard. Affordability is an ongoing economic issue. Kansas City. I was just in Kansas City. It's booming.
Yeah, I could talk about that issue for a lot longer, but let me ask you about your latest over at the Big Picture, Ritholtz.com. Never take candy from strangers. It's not your actual latest, but it's a good post to discuss, and it's kind of based on your new book, which we've talked about. But if people haven't bought your new book,
purchased.
Did you hear Senator Mark Wayne? What did he say? Where is we? Where is we? He said it twice. And the United States Senator said, where is we on the – anyway.
We is here. We is here on the Zoom.
Your new book is How Not to Invest. And this piece is titled Never Take Candy from Strangers. I love it. First of all, I thought it said never talk to strangers, and that I would have never platformed that with you, because I think that was the wrong thing to teach kids growing up.
Take candy. Talk to people, but don't take candy from them.
Let me read it. Can I read a little bit of it?
Sure. Knock yourself out.
You write, before you accept the investing advice from a random stranger, ask yourself if they're concerned with your comfortable retirement, buying a new house, or paying for your kids' college. If they don't know your zip code or tax bracket, how on earth can their advice be geared to your specific circumstances? Of course it's not. It's selling something, be it advertisements, investment products, newsletters, or God knows what else. Most of what you hear and read was not written with you in mind. It was created to sell a product. This blog post, as an example, is exhorting you to buy my book. These sales pitches are not nefarious, but they become so ubiquitous that we often overlook them. It's not realistic to suggest people tune out everything. However, I am making 3 suggestions for all consumers of financial content. Understand what media you are consuming. Make intelligent, well-informed choices. Prioritize quality over quantity. There you go.
You're really out on a ledge with that sort of radical idea of just make fewer mistakes and be less stupid. It's kind of right there. So if you don't know, look, there's 24/7 media. There's endless newspapers, magazines, radio, television, internet, Substacks, beehives, weblogs, to say nothing of the fire hose of bullshit on social media.
Yeah,
just ask yourself some questions before you listen to some rando on TikTok. Hey, who is this guy or girl? What is their track record? Have they lived through a few cycles? Do they have a process that is rational and defendable? Do they have the right temperament, or do they run around with their hair on fire? Are they a snowflake that every twitch in the market sends them running off screaming? No one's going to get it perfect, but you want someone who's at least more right than wrong, and that there's some thought behind what they're saying. It's not just clickbait. I saw something the other day. You can turn $100 into $1 million following my strategy. All you have to do is just make 1% a day. I'm like, wait a second. The market returns 8, 9, 10% a year, and those are the best managers in history. Wait, you think you're going to get 1% a day for 255 days in a row? Stop and think about how absurd that is on its face, and yet it's so seductive that it catches people. I love, in the book, I talk about the guy who says, if you're in international waters on April 15th, you don't owe any taxes. And there have been so much of this crazy crank nonsense that the IRS had to put out like a 47-point bulletin. Here's all the bullshit that people are saying that are not true. If you follow this tax advice, we will come find you, take your money, charge you interest and penalties. This will not work out for you. And yet there's just very few people. I love the TikTok investors, where this person picks out a random TikTok or Insta for that day and just reveals it in all its glory as just pure, unadulterated nonsense that it is.
Oh, I want to see that. I never done
TikTok investors, just one of my favorite follows.
Oh, good. That's on TikTok, I'm guessing.
On Twitter, on X, whatever we call it. For whatever is left of Twitter, TikTok investors, and I think he's on Blue Sky as well.
Where are you now? The podcast, the blog, are you on any – do you post regularly on any of the –
So I will occasionally throw something up on LinkedIn. You're actually reminding me I'll put the Never Take Candy from Strangers post up on LinkedIn. I think generally speaking, I like to have control over my content. Talk to people who produce a lot of YouTube videos and how frustrating it is every time they change the algorithm. I'm not a giant fan of the various email things, the Substacks, the Beehives. It's
no Beehive.
This is clearly a generational thing. Like people my age, the Gen Xers and Boomers, and I kind of have a foot in both camp. We like to go to a website and read stuff. I don't need you annoying me with email. Hey, read this. I know where you live. I can find you.
I know it's
right. And then you talk to like millennials and Gen Zs. It's like, I don't need to go to a website. Just send me the shit I'm going to read. Well, and if I don't like it, I delete it. It's like there's such a generational divide.
I actually wonder generationally how much, people read at all.
Well, there's a couple of big concerns. There was an article. I don't remember if it was the Washington Post or the Atlantic that, was it Gen Z, Gen X? One of the gens doesn't like reading stories to their children, and it turns out that people just read much less than they used to.
Yeah, my weird thing is, I'm a sucker for a audio app, the New Yorker, Washington Post, New York Times, any podcast, because I sit enough with my work all day that I don't want to sit more and read more, but I want all of that content in my brain. So I'm, when I'm running or when I'm, outside just doing stuff, I like to, or just cleaning around my house. I do a lot of cleaning in my house, believe it or not.
Here, I look at my mess. I need some help here.
I'll listen to an article often, but
right.
I don't know.
I find I process stuff differently when I see it. Like I'm a visual processor, so I want to read.
Sure,
it.
I agree, but it's like sometimes I sit so much, I just don't want to sit more. The only time I want to read is if I'm lying down in bed, and even then, I'm scrolling.
We have a routine depending on the week. I will, especially on weekends. I mean, to me, I love sitting on the beach, cracking open a book.
Yeah,
waves in the background. We find like a quiet little place away from the crowd. I'm thrilled to death with that.
Even with your attention stuff, you can sit. How long can you sit and read? How many pages or how many chapters could you? What's the longest before you look at your phone?
If I like the book, like Ready Player One, I read that on a plane from start to finish, straight through.
Didn't look at your phone.
Not once. Oh. And I remember there's a book I really enjoy, How to Invent Everything. I think Ryan North is the author. The conceit of the book is they're a time travel company, but sometimes time machines break down. By the way, time is linear. You can only go back as far as time has progressed. You can't go forward to time that has not unfolded yet. Hold that aside. And because we know that sometimes time machines break down and we can't always just send a time machine back to get you because things move around and what have you. Here's a survival guide, and it'll teach you how to invent everything that's ever been invented. And it's fascinating because the book kind of reveals how all these things that we invented, like the modern world, you're building electronics and then semiconductors and then chips before, I don't know, let's call it 1900. Just about any invention that there was could have been invented 1,000 years earlier. People just had to stop and think, hey, listen, glass blowing really became big, I don't want to say the 12th century, the 13th century, whenever it was. We've had sand and fire for thousands of years. Someone just had to figure it out. But it's a charming book, and the one I'm really looking forward to reading this summer is the new Chernow biography of Mark Twain.
Interesting.
I'm a big Twain fan, and it's a little bit of a tome, but I'm excited to
Chernow wrote the
biography
also of Grant, which was, I think, Ulysses Grant. He wrote an updated, I believe. Isn't that right? Yeah.
I'll take your word for it. Hold on.
That's cool. I love his stuff.
Yeah, me too.
Grant, Ron Chernow. Yeah.
Mark Twain, Grant, Washington, Hamilton. Yeah,
who would you rather talk to, Mark Chernow or Walter Isaacson?
Oh, well, Chernow in a heartbeat because
they both do biographies. That's why I'm saying.
No, I read Isaacson's Steve Jobs biography, and I'm a Mac head for a long time. And as a Mac head, I could tell you it was pretty awful. Like it missed a lot of really big things. He didn't capture him. So I have his Da Vinci, and I was really excited to read that. In my book, I talk about Gelman amnesia, which was something that Michael Crichton shared with the world. Gelman amnesia is in a situation where you open up a newspaper and you read a story about a subject that you are an expert in, you know intimately, or an event, you were there, and the story is just completely wrong. Oh, they didn't see this, they missed that, they don't understand this. This is terrible reporting, this is totally inaccurate. And then you turn the page and you read something about here's what's going on in Israel and Gaza, and here's what's going on in Ukraine, and you just assume that's right, despite evidence that, hey, they got this shit really wrong.
Gelman amnesia.
Gelman amnesia. And so when somebody kind of blows it with me, I'm looking for reasons to eliminate people. Listen, Andrew Sullivan, brilliant writer, excellent prose, excellent writer, shit the bed on the U.S. invasion of Iraq.
Yeah.
Couldn't have been more wrong. And listen, everybody's entitled to whiff. I get stuff wrong all the time. I put mea culpas up when I was at doing the Washington Post column once a year. I'm like, here's what I got wrong and here's what I learned from it. But when you double and triple and quadruple down or just so totally shit the bed, hey, other people are welcome to read you. I'm not calling for boycotts. I just do it. I call it information hygiene. Once you demonstrate that you're unworthy, I'm done with you.
Yep. You're damaged. It's credibility and your brand is damaged. The Gelman amnesia effect is a cognitive bias describing the tendency of individuals to critically assess media reports in a domain they are knowledgeable about, yet continue to trust reporting in other areas despite recognizing similar potential inaccuracy.
Exactly. And the takeaway, my takeaway isn't, it's not totally turn off media. It's not don't believe anybody. Don't become a curmudgeon. It's don't take candy from strangers.
Yeah.
If you know somebody, someone said to me, hey, your guys do a lot of podcasts and are on CNBC, Bloomberg, Fox, CNN. Should we not take candy from them? And it's like, no, you need to figure out for yourself. I know my guys and I trust my guys because I know their process and their track record. But don't substitute my judgment for your own. Pick somebody you find interesting. Like, I'll give you an example. Sam Rowe writes about market structure, right? He's been writing about markets for 15, 20 years. He's this kind of chill dude. He never gets too crazy when everything hits the fan. He has a solid process. He's been a whole lot more right than wrong. Like for me, if I want to learn about what's going on in the internals of the market, what's going on with the structure of the capital markets, Sam Rowe is a guy I know I can rely on. Now, I'm not telling you go rely on Sam Rowe. I'm telling you, like Jonathan Miller and Bill McBride are my go-to guys in real estate. I have these people I listen to about muni bonds, and here are the folks that I know they have a good track record analyzing hedge fund data. But everybody has to not just be so gullible and naive and just assume everything is right. You need to find a team of people. You don't have to hire them. Just subscribe to them and pay attention to what they say. Eliminate Sturgeon's Law. 90% of everything is crap. Eliminate 90% of the junk that's not worthy of your time and pay attention to that top decile that has earned your trust.
But maintain a critical approach to consumption of all media, including the media produced by people that have established trust and credibility. You always have to try to, you don't have to be a contrarian. You don't have to look for something wrong, but you have to be consistently skeptical.
Don't be gullible. When I was younger in my early days on Wall Street, every slick, smooth-talking salesman, every quarterly call, whatever a CEO said, I believed all of this, and most of it turned out to be bullshit. And it was expensive tuition. You learn the hard way. And at a certain point, if you're shopping for a mortgage and somebody tells you this is the greatest rate you're going to get, look at a few more websites, make a few more phone calls, and find out if that's really a good mortgage rate. Like, what's the salesperson going to say? Oh, our mortgage rates are 50 basis points too high. You could do better around the corner. No, this is, it's the same thing when you're shopping. I wish we put as much thought and time into our consumption of news, information, and media as we do in buying a refrigerator or planning a vacation. There's a tendency for us not to pay attention to.
You know what I do? I take a shortcut on those big purchases. I learned this when I was a young man. My uncle would always research. He's very wealthy, but very cheap. He would research the hell out of something. And so I'd either ask him to do it for me, or more likely nowadays, like, I know somebody that's like that. Like, somebody on Facebook says, just bought a new fridge. I'm like, did you do all the research? He's like, yeah. I'm like, all right, just tell me which one to buy. Just bought a new camera. I did all the research. I did hours of YouTube and whatever. Which one did you get? All right, I'll get that one. The only thing you don't want to do that on is a mattress. Don't ask anybody for their advice on a mattress, because that'd be very more divisive than abortion.
Again, so you're asking your uncle, you're asking a friend, you know their track record. Oh, this guy goes down the rabbit hole.
Does his work. I know he compares.
So you're doing exactly what you're not taking candy from a stranger.
Yeah.
You're accepting advice from someone who you know has developed a bit of an expertise in that space.
Yeah.
And, we very often feel that we're not qualified to evaluate this. And so the default setting can't be, I'm just going to believe, let me turn on the TV and whatever pours out of it, I'm just going to assume is true. You cannot assume it's all false. You just have to be a little selective and basically make intelligent, well-informed decisions. Again, I feel like I'm out on a limb with this wild-eyed, radical concept. Can we all be a little less stupid? That's all I'm asking for.
Oh, speaking of which, I should have played this clip. I got to figure out how to play clips in this. But today, the Treasury Secretary was asked about, does the big, beautiful bill create budget deficits? And he tried to give a bullshit
answer.
Well, eventually the smart, I think it was a senator, asked him, did the Bush tax cuts create deficits?
Oh, yes, those created jobs.
And he wouldn't answer, but it was such a great question because it goes along the lines of kind of what you're saying here a little bit in terms of critical thinking. Like, when we've done this in the past, how did it work? What happened in the past when you cut taxes without cutting spending at the equivalent rates? Well, it's supposed to grow the tax base, and so you have so many more receipts coming in, but that's been a lie, a zombie lie, I think, as your friend Paul Krugman would call it.
Yes, that's correct. That was fun doing his podcast. I started hearing from people I haven't heard from in years.
Oh, that's cool.
So it's always like I know your followers and they know me, but his followers don't necessarily know me. It was always interesting. Like, dude, I had no idea you knew. I know a bunch of cool people. It's that's the fun part of working in New York City is you meet all these people. It's really cool.
He was at your book launch.
Yes.
And he was dressed like such a schlub. I wanted to say to him, I'm like, you're Paul Krugman, slopola.
He's such a pussycat. People think of him, people know him from his writings, and they think he's this fierce firebrand, and he's really just
I wanted so badly to talk to him, but why
didn't you?
One of your sycophants wouldn't leave him alone.
Who was it?
I forget, a bald white guy. They were all bald white guys. There's so many
Dude, you're a bald white guy.
Yeah, that's why I didn't stick out in any way. I felt like just being in a finance room, I was like, wow.
But you have a beard. He has a beard. That's Hey, so what do you do to maintain your beard? That's a great Krugman opening line.
From you on how to get in. I just needed that fucking guy to shut the fuck up. I don't know who
Listen, at a cocktail party like that where there are some notables, and there were quite a few notables roaming around, you give someone 2 minutes and then it's like,
no doubt. I'm telling you.
Do you remember the Chappelle? Wrap it up. The device. from the Chappelle Show. Oh my God, it's such a hilarious.
I'm sure you're going to explain it to me live.
Nope, just you could Google it. I'm not going to explain it to you.
Thank you. Nothing worse. I just got together with a bunch of my buddies from high school, and I stopped a few. You got to stop people when they start explaining a scene. That's fine if you're good at it, and it's the olden days. Now you can tell me about that episode or scene. I'll watch it.
Text me a link. I'm good. Just text me a link.
Just show me on your phone right now. Just shut up and show me on your phone. It's a Steve Martin bit. Show me Steve Martin doing it, dummy.
Right.
All right. Thank you, Ritholtz. Always great. Really appreciate you joining me.
Thank you, Pete, as always.
And thank you, everybody, for stopping by. I'm ending it. All right. There you go. Barry Ritholtz. Go get the new book. Go subscribe to his podcast. Follow him on the social media, all the Barry Ritholtz things, information linked in the show notes, as there is every guest, more about me, the show, and people who contribute to it. And so please check out the links at the end of every day's show notes. And read the email that I send out every morning. I include a photo of vitamin N, nature, that's sent to me by some listener somewhere in the world, and I really appreciate it. So send those over to standupwithpete@gmail.com. Go buy John Carroll's new album. Download it right now at johncarroll.org. That's all I've got for you. Take care of your mental health. Practice good mental hygiene, being mindful, check in with yourself, take breaks, get outside, take walks, take naps, do whatever you need to do to take the best care of yourself. And I hope to see you tonight at 8 p.m. at our hangout. All right, that's it. Talk to you tomorrow.
Can't deny what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up.